Last March, some Roxbury mothers learned their children would have no neighborhood schools to attend this fall. They were told that the children would be bused to schools in other parts of the city. At the March meeting of the Boston School Committee, it was voted by a majority to close the Asa Gray and Aaron Davis elementary schools and bus some 500 children to other schools throughout the city. It was the first move by the board to put into effect a large-scale movement of Negro children in order to racially balance some of the Boston schools. And the board said it was under pressure from the state, which was withholding some $9 million in aid until the local board came up with an acceptable plan to end the busing. State Commissioner of Education Owen Kiernan was asked if the state wasn't contributing to the controversy by ordering the closing of those two schools.
I'd have to answer in the negative again. Actually, the two schools in question are in the path of the Southwest Expressway. They're schools that were built in the post-war period of the Civil War. They were scheduled for demolition anyway by the school committee. The last three superintendents of schools, including Superintendent Ohrenberger, have recommended the demolition. The Sargent report in 1962 indicated that both schools should be phased out by 1965, so that actually the closing of the two schools was planned long before the state's racial imbalance law was placed on the statute books of this Commonwealth.
Superintendent Ohrenberger was asked why the two schools were closed and the orders issued to bus the children across the city.
In order to comply with Chapter 641, the demands of the State Board of Education's task force originally was to close 4 schools. It was impossible for us to close 4 schools, so that the school committee in its plan compromised and suggested the closing of 2 schools, even though it wasn't their wish to close any.
But you've closed down schools in a specific neighborhood. Now these children are being forced to be bused elsewhere. Why did you comply with the state's demands?
Because we had to do this in order to have the money, the tax money that was being withheld from the Boston Public Schools by not complying with Chapter 641.
2 weeks ago, representatives of Negro parents attended a school board meeting and expressed their fears of busing the children into what they termed a hostile environment. The school board also has on file letters from some 30-odd parents protesting any form of busing and insisting that their children should go to schools in their own community.
When the decision was made and the orders were designed to distribute these children, we dismantled these schools. These schools could not be opened at this time.
So there is no school these children can go to in Roxbury, and they must be bused.
There is no neighborhood school in either of these locations, and these children must be bused.
And it's not the Boston school department's fault, but it was forced on you by the state.
I would say that the Boston School Committee were forced to close 2 schools in order to comply with Chapter 641.
The state's racial imbalance law contains a clause on busing. It says that no child can be bused if a parent or guardian expresses opposition in writing to the local school board. Commissioner Kiernan was asked, in view of this clause, whether the enforced transfer of some of the Roxbury children did not amount to forcible busing.
I can fully appreciate why mothers are anxious about their children, but it is a safe and we think reasonably efficient busing system that Boston is going to work out, and I would appeal to the mothers to stand by the public schools and stay with this particular transportation system.
On at least one aspect of the situation, both Commissioner Kiernan and Superintendent Ohrenberger are in agreement. Children by law must go to school, and if there is no school in their immediate area, then they must be assigned elsewhere, even if it means busing. Bill Harrington reporting from Roxbury.
Any attempt to push American reality had in the past. Ultimately suicidal. And I would say, in relation to that last point, that we have, in the last 3 years, seen a concerted effort on the part of the government of the United States opt.
One of the unpleasant facts that came out of last summer's riots in many American cities was an anti-Semitic attitude on behalf of many of the black nationalists throughout the country. The American Jewish Congress meeting in Boston heard their president, Rabbi Arthur Lelyveld, call for middle-class Jews to help build a society to eliminate poverty, not to debate morals, but to prove their principles by closing the affluence gap between white and black. Negro educator Dr. Kenneth Clark told the meeting that Negro bitterness against whites is often expressed in resentment against Jewish merchants.
The problem of anti-Semitism among extreme Negro nationalist groups might become more serious and involve the additional ingredient of more systematic communication and involvement with right-wing, reactionary, anti-Semitic white groups. There are some suggestions of this possibility by the fact that some of the more sophisticated anti-Semitic cliches, which are not a part of the vocabulary of the folk Negro, have been adopted and used by some of these extreme black nationalist groups. And there are indications that the substance of the anti-Semitic literature produced and disseminated by white groups have been occasionally used by some extreme black nationalist cult groups.
Speakers at the American Jewish Congress meeting expressed the fear that the Black Power issue will drive Jews away from the civil rights movement. This is Jim Pansullo reporting.
Are there any Negro leaders who are doing a good job for their people?
Frankly, we don't have any Negro leaders, in my opinion. Because the way this looks to me, the first person that grabs a soapbox and makes a speech in the press the next day, he's a Negro leader. We never heard of him. You know?
You think the fellows like Stokely Carmichael, do they speak for the average Negro?
Stokely Carmichael speaks for Stokely Carmichael.
A lot of people are blaming Black Power advocates for riots across the country. What's your opinion?
Well, no, actually, I don't think it is. But there always have been riots in America, and there's always been two different sort of conflicts. And mostly it has been the police. If you remember way back, we had riots, labor riots, because there was a labor problem. And today, we have a labor problem, but it's between the Negro and generally the police. It's an economical situation. I don't think it's Black Power.
I think to alleviate the most of the riot of the future, most of the people would get together and get to the bottom with the communication of the people, find out what the problem is. And after finding out what the problem is, I believe that it will solve all the rights and all the problems of the people. Most of all is getting together and getting understanding.
Everybody needs someone to blame, but the blame comes from the sickness of the country in itself, in human relations. I believe Stokely Carmichael picked up the ball because he didn't find an immediate answer, and people are nervous and impatient and want a real answer. But Stokely Carmichael is not the reason. The reason is the sickness of the country.
What would you like to see the city administration do in Boston to better conditions here?
I believe the city is compelled to have communication with all of the people of Boston and understanding. Now, to clarify that, I would say, if we communicate with the city officials and they understand our problem, if we make an unreasonable request, be honest enough to tell us that we're unreasonable. But if we have a sound, reasonable request, then at least give us the consideration of some sort of understanding and accomplishment.
Bobby, how old are you?
14.
What do you want to be when you grow up?
A doctor.
Why do you think riots start in cities, Bob?
People like Stokely Carmichael come to Detroit and places like that, and then they know it's going to incite a riot, so they don't know he's there. People like that don't know he's there come around. They just, they see Stokely and people marching, so they want to go start throwing bottles and things like that, and that's going to incite a riot.
And to offer concessions to the black movement, yet at the same time, with the rise of the poverty programs and the rise of the attempts to ameliorate the conditions of black life in America, we have had the spontaneous eruptions of 57 rebellions in the country. The problem that we are in today is a problem that we have arrived at precisely because of the help. I went to the Harvard-Yale game a couple of weeks ago. It's no big deal. No, these are not subjective questions. One thing, I was at Harvard. Harvard taught me to think in spite of myself. They didn't teach me to understand anything. I didn't understand anything until I got out and worked and got involved in life itself. But they did teach you to see what was similar about things and what was different. In the panel later on, I asked my brother Rushing to participate on the panel with me. He's another Harvard man. Lots of Harvard guys, another guy in Boston, lots of Harvard guys around. Some are working for the man, and some are working for the brother.
And habitual attendance of church on Sunday, and a silly little thing like lighting vigil lights, and this is sanctity, see. Now, Christianity is this, and this is what Christ came down for, and that was for brotherhood, and that was for justice. He was a great man. He was a radical, dynamic leader who confronted the structure and refused to accept the status quo. And for his efforts, he was nailed to a cross. And I think that perhaps what we need in the church today is a return to this life of Christ in the radical way in which he lived. And if that means that the church, the institutional church in the land today, has to go through the same kind of persecution that Christ went through 2,000 years ago, well and good. Maybe our churches have to be burned and our schools torn down and our sisters nailed to crosses and our ministers beaten to death. Because unless we have a crucifixion, you see, we cannot have a resurrection. Now, Father Bernard Patterson, black priest, Benedictine from down Kentucky, was down there a number of years ago, around the time of the COFO movement. He was telling me, he says, Jim, he said, down Mississippi, I met a group of sisters down there, and I asked them why they did not integrate their hospital. And he said, those sisters told me, well, we can't do that. The Ku Klux Klan wrote us a letter. He said they'd kill us if we integrated our hospital, see? And he said, fine, good. Wonderful. Martyrs for the sake of Christian unity, social justice. This is what we need.
There's only one historical example, and that is in the period of Reconstruction of this country. If you examine history, you will find that the questions of both universal education and universal suffrage
Mr. Hatcher, I'd like to pursue just a little the point you made describing yourself as having just gotten under the wire from the apparent threat of metropolitanization of Gary and something that's likely to happen elsewhere. Don't you think it's true that the economic and social revolution that is indicated is going to leave the country helpless unless there is something more than just a shift of population from one place to another? If the Negroes take over the cities, city government, city structures, and leave the suburbs to the whites, isn't that just going to reverse the problem and continue it?
I would say specifically in answer to your question that no, it is not simply a matter of the transference of one racial group from the cities and the takeover of another racial group of the cities that will represent, let's say, the end solution to those problems.
You don't necessarily view metropolitanization or changes in government structure as an evil, then?
I think that it depends upon how those methods and those changes are utilized and for what purpose they are utilized. In Gary, for instance, I am convinced that the accelerated move towards annexation in the last year was a direct reaction to the possibility of the election of a Negro to the office of mayor. And in that sense, I view it as an evil. I view it as an effort to avoid the natural democratic process. And I would not say that there might not be instances where a metropolitan form of government or even annexation might not be a wise and useful thing.
Do you think Negroes can survive in the city by themselves with no white help?
Well, I think that's really a hypothetical question, and it would be to answer it would be highly speculative. The question of whether Negroes can survive is not and does not exist in a vacuum. I would say this to you, that if Negroes cannot survive in the cities or survive in this country, then this country cannot really survive, at least as we understand it now.
What do you plan specifically to enlist the aid of the white population of Gary in straightening the city out?
Well, we intend to give all elements in our city an opportunity to become involved in their government, to participate not only on the level of serving on commissions and boards and things of that nature, but to get actively involved in private efforts to change the life condition of the people of our community. We have already been in contact with a number of people who in the past have exerted great influence on the destiny of that community, and we are asking them to make available to our administration their talents and their resources and their abilities in moving towards the common goal of progress for the city of Gary.